Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for May 2022. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs. By sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs or GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/roguewatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we are glad to have you. This month's topic, as determined by the poll, is dragons. It's the other name of the game, though despite being right there in the name, dragons actually don't come up very often in D&D, the joke being it's dungeons and only occasionally dragons. How do we use these powerful and recognizable bastions of fantasy in our games? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Stan.
Greetings.
Peglegs Smitty.
Hello.
And special guest, a veteran of dragon wielding. You also know him as Valravn, Gwynatane Lonrier. Mr. Chris.
Very good, sir.
I tried. I haven't actually said the full name in a while.
Yeah.
So, I mean, dragons, obviously I'm a fan. I love fantasy as a genre. Flight of the Dragons, my online nickname forever, and really still is in a lot of places, is Gorbash, which is the fucking name of a dragon in that old, I think it's maybe late 80s, early 90s animated movie thing. So I love dragons. I love them. The weird thing is, in all the years that we've played Dungeons and Dragons, I haven't actually used dragons themselves very much. I think I can count probably one hand that we've used them. Ironically, we just used one recently, which was pretty fun in Rime of the Frost Maiden, which we can certainly talk about that a little bit. Nothing too spoilery, of course, but in terms of what we just experienced. But I think dragons are obviously pretty well represented in the monster manual. There's the 5 metallic dragons and 5 chromatic dragons, which are the good and evils, and all the different elemental colors. And the most exciting thing to me is that we have different stat blocks for each one, which very much align to the tiers of play. You basically have your low-level young dragon, you've got your older teenage dragon, and you've got your older adult dragon, and then you've got the big badass ancient dragon. Times however many dragons there are. That is a huge... How many pages is this? It's a solid chunk. Yeah, it's like 30 pages of the monster manual is just devoted to dragons. So there's a ton of content already in here. But I think dragons can be tricky to use in D&D because they are... You kind of have to build things around them. You can't just throw dragons somewhere. They're, apex predators. They're intelligent. Usually they are the most powerful creature around. Even when they're a young one, they tend to threaten entire realms, so they tend to be just kind of the bosses of different regions. So I guess I'm curious to see how you all have used dragons in your adventures, whether they're the big honchos, they play a major role like they did in Chris's campaign as Storm King's Thunder, or whether they're just kind of one-off layers or something. And Stan, we're going to start with you. Tell me about your opening thoughts about using dragons.
I absolutely love using dragons, and I use them somewhat frequently. Part of that is the campaigns that I've been running is I've been going through the Horde of the Dragon Queen and then into Rise of Tiamat, collectively known as the Tyranny of Dragons campaign.
Right.
Dragons show up a lot in there for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And then in my homebrew world, certain major NPCs actually are polymorph dragons.
Ooh.
So, and I use some of the old D&D lore where they have some tells. Like if you see a polymorphed silver dragon, they might wear a little bit of silver jewelry. Or a gold dragon might smell like cinnamon.
That was a big Dragonlance thing, wasn't it? Where
Yes.
the dragons could all become people, and there was a big rumor about if they were, certain people were actual dragons because they just liked chilling as... It was almost like the gods walking among us thing, and they just like to do that and be more like people.
Especially,
Right.
it tends to be more of a thing that you see with the metallic dragons can do it at a younger age. Only the certain chromatic dragons can do it at advanced age.
Interesting.
That's one of the big things, one of the driving forces between Old Gnawbones. don't make me say her real name. It's a lot of consonants together, and it's like 26 letters long.
Nice.
That's one of her goals. Is she really desperately wants to be able to polymorph into a human or an elf, but she knows that if she does it, she doesn't have all of her abilities, and she's terrified, so she won't do it. And so she's the puppet master of politics in Waterdeep and Neverwinter.
That's a cool
angle. And she was the big bad in my campaign.
Okay.
To use her, and you introduce early, and then you pull back.
She the one that kind of hangs out near Phandalin area?
She's on the other side of the Sword Mountains, and she's in Cryptgarden Forest.
Okay. Where most of the adventures take place around like Prince of the Apocalypse was in that area too, I think. A
little bit south of there, yep.
Storm Valley, yeah.
But yeah, I love them, use them frequently, and find creative ways of introducing them when I can.
All right. Pegleg, give me your opening thoughts on using dragons in your campaigns.
I'm kind of the opposite. I don't use them very often, and when I do, I try to make them something that the players will remember. Spoilers are okay not for Rhyme, obviously, but is that correct?
It's just announce like what we're gonna spoil, I think.
Okay.
But this should be DMs mostly, but obviously some of us play as players in other campaigns. So as long as we give people a heads up if we're talking about a certain campaign, then we can talk about it. Yeah.
So for example, in Lost Mine of Phandelver, my players fought Venomfang, who actually ran away, and that was part of the driving force to get them tied into the events when we transitioned to Storm King's Thunder, was hunting down Venomfang.
Oh wow.
Who I gave some lair actions to summon kobolds so that he'd have some minions. And then same thing within Dragon of Icespire Peak. I made sure to buff her with some lair actions as well.
Okay, tell me about Icespire Peak, because I haven't actually read this adventure yet. And it sounds like it uses dragons, because the one in Phandelver is just almost a side footnote. Like there's no quest involved. It's just, hey, you go to this area and there happens to be a dragon in this one corner. To me, at least, that's how I read it. But I don't know anything about the Icespire Peak one. I don't know if it uses it better.
Yeah, so Icespire Peak, one of the ways that I really like how the adventure is structured is that the dragon moves in and that displaces someone who displaces someone else and just ends up causing all sorts of trouble for the area around Phandalin.
Okay.
So the taking down this dragon, whose name I've forgotten because I actually changed it, is like that's your BBEG for the encounter.
Is it a young dragon? Is it the young?
Yeah,
Sablock?
it's a young white dragon.
Okay.
Which I ended up buffing a little bit because a CR6 against a party of level 6 characters when you don't have minions or anything else isn't that much of a challenge.
Yeah,
or if you don't play them evil, never let them land.
Yeah, that's part of the problem with dragons is that playing them optimally is not fun for the players.
Nope.
Well, unless, and I'll toot my own horn, and you take inspiration from the Hobbit, where it becomes like a disaster movie. It's less about like, oh, we're adventuring party that's going to go fight this dragon, and more about, oh shit, there's just a jet up there, like just throwing missiles down on top of this town, and we have to just deal with the fallout of that. And maybe we can't even actually fuck with the dragon because we're this level and we don't even have the means of messing with it, which I enjoyed pulling that off twice. I've done it twice, actually.
Yeah.
With Tomb, I treated it like like an action sequence of the dragon coming in and just spoilers for a section of our Tomb of Annihilation campaign. There's a dragon in that campaign, and the way I used it was to foreshadow it by when the players approached the general lair area in a ship, I had the dragon come out and just fucking burn their ship down. And there was no point in which they entered combat. There was nothing about, oh shit, we're gonna have to fight this. It was just, hey, you're gonna have to roll saves and just treat this like an action sequence.
It's a bad thing happening to you, and that's it. There's no way around it.
And then
that's how Horde of the Dragon Queen starts.
Right, with the village being attacked. Yeah.
I intentionally did a side quest before we started that adventure because of scaling to get them at level 2 when I hit greenest. But you come into that town and all your players, I was playing with all rookie players, they're looking at me like, you're doing what?
That's a tricky opening. I remember reading about that. You're basically in a village that's just being attacked by a dragon and like invaded by kobolds and shit, and you're like level 1 going, what the fuck are we doing?
What are we doing here?
And yeah,
Are
you're
there
looking
some
at the
rats we
players
can
and
go
it's
fight?
yeah, well that happens too. But yeah, they're looking at you like it's an adult blue what? Well, it was nice playing this game.
Yeah. But I think that's the goal is you can introduce these huge threats, and because they can be literally so huge they can threaten entire towns, and if depending on what tier the players are at, it can be pretty obvious to say, okay, your goal is not to literally defeat this thing. Your goal is just, it's a fucking disaster movie. It's just you're trying to save people, and hopefully there's also minions around so you can get some combat in, but it just becomes this like ongoing environmental hazard essentially.
Yeah, and Chris did that in Storm Kings at the intro.
Oh, that's true. But they didn't even know it was a dragon at that point. But yes, I did do that. That was the talking about the attack on the tower.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which, I guess you never even saw the dragon in that, but that was
That's
definitely
true.
the same thing. Where it's like, you're not going to fight this.
I think at that point you weren't willing to reveal what the main villain was, right? That was the tease. Yeah. So we weren't even sure we were up against a dragon at that point, I think.
Yep. Yeah, but it was played the same way though. That same style of like, no, this is just a disaster thing happening to you, or not a fight.
So, Chris, we haven't gone to you for your opening thoughts on using dragons either.
Oh yeah, I love them. I think one of the most fun parts about dragons is that just by their very nature being like, ancient, not all powerful, but extremely powerful beings, you can kind of go wild with their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of make them these like very, very much larger than life characters, and you can make them very memorable that way. Not only in their power, but in their personality and mannerisms.
They're just like people.
Yeah, right.
But amplified.
But amplified, exactly. Yeah, but amplified. And they're also a fun way to do that sort of toying with the players thing, where like, do you want to poke the bear? You don't want to, but do you want to?
Yeah, I talked about that in the crafting stream this week about how much fun it was to, because in D&D 5th edition especially, players get so powerful so quickly that regardless almost of their personality, the player character always gets a little bit of swagger and kind of throws their weight around and really kind of feels like they can kind of, maybe bully's not the right word, but they've got like they've got the butt that can cash the check that their mouth often writes to reverse engineer that phrase. And so with a lot of those social scenes, the DM's almost on the back foot, and a lot of times, even if they try to act tough, the players can usually like meet them.
Yeah, it's the implication of I could kill everything in this room. Like, and I'm not saying I'm going to, but I could.
Yeah, but then when you use something like a lich or a vampire or a dragon, something that is sociable but also has the power to back it up, again depending on where your players are, then suddenly it's on the other foot. Like the DM has control of the situation again, and it gets real fun when the DM can then use that swagger against the players.
Yep.
And the players
they have to deal with that personality. They have to like really engage with the personality at that point.
Yeah, and you use that for I think it was Clouth in Storm Kings.
Yes.
When we met with him, and he was very like haughty and domineering and wanting people to worship him, megalomaniac and all that. And
exactly.
And my character failed a like a charm save, I think, and was just like already like getting the T-shirt and the sign.
Yeah. Yep. One of his cult. Yeah.
Became a follower.
Yeah, it's been fun, sort of like exploring like I was saying, like the different personalities, types of dragons that you might see, because Clouth was like the quintessential just evil red dragon, like he's got cultists and he wants power and whatnot. And then I also had, what was the other one? I forget his name, but I had the NPC ally dragon in Storm
Oh,
Kings?
yes.
Helgelos.
Helgelos. That was a
Yes.
unique situation. I want you to talk a lot about that because we've never had an ally that was that powerful before, but also with such a unique personality, and obviously they were a dragon.
Yep.
But I
yep.
think when we first met them, we didn't even know they were a dragon, right?
I think so.
I think that was the case. Like Sam was talking about, a polymorphed
It was. Yeah.
humanoid.
Yeah, he was
They
a
polymorphed into a
polymorph.
humanoid.
Yep. Yep. He was like a little halfling dude.
Yeah. I forget.
That was Felgalos was entirely reverse. I don't believe he's in the Storm King's book. I don't think, but he's totally reverse engineered from a expansion thing I got off the.
I think you greatly expanded his role. I think he's
Yeah.
technically in there,
He's
but
just
he's a
mentioned.
bit player. He's a bit player.
Think
Er-
in the book he's just in. I can't remember what the name of the flying castle is. Like Linar Mall or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And
the
then
giant
the flying misfortune, I think, is the expansion that like
That's
actually has you get together with him.
Yep. So that was my starting point. It's like before I even started like really building the campaign, I had that adventure like in my pocket, and I kind of reverse engineered his role in the story to get to that adventure.
Okay.
So yeah, I had to like really.
That's the one we went
expand.
out to the desert with the dragons.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That was a lot of
'Cause,
dragon
yeah.
stuff. That was good.
There was a lot of dragon
Yeah.
stuff. Those two more. I think it was the teenage ones.
Yeah, the blue dragons.
Blue dragons.
Yeah,
Actually,
Imrit's
yeah,
children or
that's right.
Yeah. A lot of spoilers for Storm Kings probably in this
Yes.
talk, by the way.
We haven't got the Tyranny of Dragons yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I had to for Helgelos. I had to like give like a disadvantage to having such. And I think what I
Yeah.
did was the like unlucky aura because he was like a.
Yeah.
I forget what the story was there. Like he was like addicted to some weed that
He had
was like
he had to that's right. He had
Yeah.
to smoke a certain
Tobacco.
weed
yeah
to stop his
his
bad
unlucky
luck
aura.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think that might be from the Flying Misfortune, actually, or at least part of it. The him trying to get his weed back.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
Yeah,
that's from the adventure itself. And then I think I reverse engineered the like unlucky aura as part of like, oh, I want to give them a dragon ally, but it needs to not just, tank everything for them.
Well, that's what I liked about that too. That people normally would flock to the strong NPC, but they kept trying to get away from him because he kept giving people disadvantage.
That's right. Yep. He wasn't quite a good teammate.
That campaign was a
Close
great
but not
use
close.
of multiple kinds of dragons. We had the dragon ally, we had dragons that we could fight at a mid-tier level, and then again, heavy spoilers for Storm King's Thunder.
Oh yes.
A big dragon was our big bad boss at the end.
Yes, and that's another example of something you were talking about earlier, where the dragon polymorph comes into play, because that was like the whole. Which, to be fair, you guys kind of skipped over some of that flow. I think it was in the underwater giant dungeon.
Oh God, we skipped at least two of the like main big dungeons in that campaign.
Yep, but Iamrith being polymorphed as a giantess who was like the advisor to the king and the princess was like the primary plot of Storm King's Thunder, where she's like polymorphed the entire time and she's trying to destroy the giants from the inside as a giant. So yeah, I really got to play with that aspect of it as well.
Tell us more about Tyranny of Dragons, Stan. How, because that was used very early on in D&D 5e.
It is the beginning of 5e.
Yeah, basically.
Right? Like the very first one. Yeah.
I mean, once you get past the train wreck of everything's off scale, where there's cakewalk fights, and then you will TPK the party if you run this as written.
This is pre-balance.
Yeah,
This is the beta.
before it was made before the monster manual was done, so balance is not a thing. It was all story, so you will have to adjust it. But you start off with, hey, we're fighting a blue dragon, and then you have an honor duel with a half dragon. You will lose a character. It's as written. You will lose a character.
Wow.
The clerics will bring them back, but your players don't know that, especially if they're rookies. And
that feels a little mean.
Signwrath is using, his weapon, he will literally cut them in half. He's like a level 6 fighter or something. with multi-attack and everything else, and you're going up against a first level fighter. They're
Great.
done.
Yeah. Welcome to D&D.
Yep. And then, you've got the introduction of minions, where you start seeing that kobolds take care of dragon eggs, and they will be a little haughty about, we know dragons and you humans don't. That comes up. And then I got into some of my own homebrew stuff where I pulled in I don't like Chapter 4, and we've discussed that in other roundtables. I brought in an old Dragonlance module and ran part of that as Chapter 4, and pulled out the old Chrysanith from Dragons of Autumn Twilight and used her as a black dragon.
Nice.
And something that a lot of people don't do is playing into their dragon's personality. Your white dragons tend to be dumb as a box of rocks, and they're more bestial. They're hunters. They're just out to eat. Where's my next meal coming from? Black dragons like to torture and torment their prey. Green dragons, like old Gnawbones, are puppet masters. They don't care as much about gold. They'll give gold away, but they keep people. They want minions, people to expand their power beyond their lair.
Yeah.
So they will get a politician in their back pocket. They will hire adventuring parties to go find magic items for them. So they are the ultimate puppet masters. As Klaus, you ran Klaus great. He's the ultimate megalomaniac. It's perfect. And blue dragons they love war. So they love flying above an army and just strafing for hours. They get a kick out of it, and that's why Horde of the Dragon Queen starts off with it. So that's something that a DM can play into, is using the personality of your dragons. And on the other side of that is, just because it's a metallic and it's a good dragon doesn't mean that his goals or her goals are going to line up with yours.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my uses of an NPC, there's a very powerful advisor or politician in Waterdeep that is a polymorph silver dragon in my campaign. And the players thought that was one of their patrons. They did something, and all of a sudden now they're on the other side of that dragon. The dragon's infuriated with them because it moved again. They moved against her wishes.
Yeah.
And so now they have an enemy in a silver dragon, a good silver dragon, but they messed with something they shouldn't have messed with. And they upset part of her plans.
I get that it's easy shorthand to have these different dragons in these defined personality roles and traits, but I have very mixed feelings about that, because I feel like that lends itself to too much metagaming for the players. And I don't know, I feel like it would be more interesting if you came across a dragon, you even found out what color it was, but that you still had just no idea like what it was. I feel like the color obviously would tell you where it typically layers and what's coming out of its mouth. But I would, and obviously as a DM you can change whatever, but I think it'd be more fun to really change these personalities around. And I get that dragons are literally were created by the dragon god, and they've all got very specific, or I guess there was a Tiamat and what's the other one's name? Bahamut, yeah. Made the good ones. And so they're not, it's different rules in terms of how they're made and everything. But I think it'd be more interesting if you met a, red dragon, all of a sudden it was just super friendly and loved people, or you met a white dragon who was just super clever and smart, or a copper dragon who was just a huge asshole to everybody and lived in a sewer or something,
you have
sorry.
I was just you have a player in a game that I can't spoil stuff, Eric.
Yes.
I do
what
think
you were
that
saying. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
What you were saying about the good aligned red dragon was actually my first experience with a dragon in D&D. Was we had a king's advisor that had polymorphed and then had a curse put on them so they couldn't polymorph back. So they were stuck at a human. We went and broke the curse, and he polymorphed into a red dragon in front of us, and we had a moment of, wait, aren't red dragons bad? And we were sitting there wondering if we just damned this entire kingdom, and then found out that, oh no, he's on our side.
Nice.
Yeah, I think to me the whole chromatic dragons are evil, metallic dragons are good, and they all have these very set personalities. I think those are rules that are given to DMs with the intention that the DMs will break them
Yeah.
to a certain extent. Because like it's guidelines that you can then break for the express purpose of surprising your players or putting a twist on a situation.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing for me as like orcs are evil. You know, it's like well they're just evil in the book, so all orcs are evil. It's like well okay, but you know I'm not gonna do that as a DM just because that's kind of you know simple I guess.
Yeah, and dragon personalities, like anything else, your environment and your life circumstances impact how you respond to the world.
Yeah.
It adjusts your perspective. So if you take a being that's 1,200 years old, they've seen some stuff,
Right. The way I like to
that's going
imagine
to
it.
influence them.
Yeah, the way I like to imagine it, with like anytime the player's talking to dragons, is like the way we might talk to like a talking squirrel or something. You know, it's just something that is much smaller than us, and we could, you know, just step on it at any moment, and it doesn't. What it's doing doesn't really matter to us in any, you know, meaningful way. But you know.
If you're against one that is that upper higher tier, oftentimes when you meet one in D&D, it is for the purpose of fighting it as a boss. In which case, you don't necessarily use one that is like godlike to you. You just use it that's kind of a tough boss stat block.
Right. Which reminds me of your tomb dragon, which you had such a good time strafing us and disastering us with that dragon, and then when we actually fought him, we handed him his ass.
Yeah, I'm not. First of all, I'm just not great at necessarily running combat as optimally as I could be, and dragons should be as devious and clever and know their surroundings and know how to use their stuff to the utmost. I mean, even I'm looking at the stat block of a green dragon wormling has an intelligence of 14.
Oh wow!
I mean, and a wisdom of 11. Like they're just straight up, better than the average person as a small baby.
But their stats improve with age.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. That is a unique organism that never actually deteriorates.
And so their personality is going to evolve and grow with them.
Yeah.
So the younger the dragon, the more quote stereotypical I would say their personality is. But when you get older and these big ancient dragons, they develop
some shit.
They develop like once again, Storm Kings. You've got a blue dragon that is conniving like a green. She's not leading this.
Right.
She's not sitting back as a general running an army and then strafing overhead. She's right in the mix herself, and as a spy. Very unusual behavior for a quote blue.
Right.
Old Gnawbones, my players absolutely hate her, but they've had conversations with her minions and they've been put on her payroll. They're actually working for her, somewhat against their will, because she recognizes you guys are one of the, they're at like a level 12 now. It's like, you're one of the baddest things on the Sword Coast. I want you working for me. We have an enemy in common. You hunt down dragon cultists, I'll foot the bill.
Nice.
Because I'm tired of them trying to turn me into a Draco Lich. So you take care of them, we'll get along fine. You stay out of my business, I'll stay out of yours.
Nice. I do like working for unconventional allies quite a bit.
Right.
And they absolutely hate her with a passion.
It's a true boss relationship.
Uh-huh.
Let's talk about dragon combat and tactics, something Pegleg mentioned, where if you actually use a dragon to its utmost, it basically just stays in the sky until its breath weapon recharges, and then it fires from either a 60-foot or whatever their range on their breath weapon is. It's a 90-foot cone, 120-foot laser blast, whatever it is, and that becomes problematic for the player. So usually you got to go fight it in its lair, but the lair is usually made to like have them fight around. Has anybody run some pretty crazy, complex, interesting dragon battles that came off pretty satisfying? Or unsatisfying for whatever reason? Because I've got probably that story.
I will say the one that I ran that I think I was going to have him just be as asshole as he can be. You guys handled it really well and had a ton of fun with it, and kind of shut him down, and that was the War for the Lost Plane Dragon fight, where you were talking to him, and then I think Heather was trying to like deceive him, but he caught on to her, and then he was just gonna fly straight up, and you like two
this
of
was
you
the
jumped.
the dude with the sword.
Yes, the possessed
Okay,
dragon.
God,
yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, the forest dragon that was possessed by the sword, and he tried to fly straight up, and two of you like leapt onto him as he was flying up. Now, granted, this was tier 3, so
yeah,
I feel like you guys were probably
at some when you get to that. I think when you get to that level, and we discussed this before, you just start throwing problems at your players and just be like, I don't know how you're gonna solve this, but you're gonna do it somehow.
Exactly, and you guys did it really well. Like two of you were like crawling all over him. You guys were casting spells and teleporting people off of his back. It was it was all great.
Yeah. Because the whole goal is just to pull this, which that's all. That, as a side note, that's when you have a combat encounter where the players are trying to do a thing other than kill all monsters. I think that also makes it really memorable and interesting. Whether it's like you have to save a person, or you have to pull a lever, or get to one location to another, that automatically makes it way more memorable. And sometimes it's pulling a possessed sword out of a dragon.
Yep.
Out of its head, I think.
Out of its head. That's right. I will also say the one I feel like your dragon story is probably very similar to mine, Eric. I was not terribly satisfied with the climax of Storm King's Thunder. The Iamrith fight turned into just a bit of a slugfest where she just kind of stood there and did her things against you, and you guys just stood there and did your things against her. I mean, part of that was a setting, that was in a cave, so the dragon wasn't able to fly around really.
Yeah.
Too much.
We were all powered to giant strength.
You were all powered to giant strength, which was the campaign's way of letting you fight an ancient dragon.
Right. That fucking Wizards has done this several times where they throw this huge threat at you at the end, but you're only like level 11 or 12 or something. And they're like, all right, so we have to come up with, because Tomb does the same fucking thing. I kind of tweaked it a little bit, but they're like, all right, well, all your spirits suddenly turn you into superpowers. Now you're going to fight to violation. Spoilers. You're going to fight a Serac himself at the end. It's like, what? Like, why? We haven't earned this. We're literally just got to level 11 or something at the end. Like, what's the point of, I don't like that philosophy that Wizards uses for a lot of their campaigns that I've looked at is, we don't actually have the content to get you up to those levels. So we're just going to do this shortcut that doesn't feel very satisfying for either the DM or the player in order for you to fight this like epic battle that's way later in your career.
Yep.
The other thing about Storm King's Thunder's final confrontation as written is that part of it is they just give NPCs, which I think are an even worse offender because the players aren't doing the things.
No.
The DM's just rolling dice against himself.
And, this is just, people being self-conscious in general, but burned into my brain as like oh shit, this is bad, is Reese saying, why are we even here? when the giants are fighting Iamrith? And it's just like, because the giants are doing way more damage than you guys, right? Because the giants were just hacking at her and doing like 20 points of damage with each hack. And Reese is back there just going, why are we here? It's like, I don't know, man. This is, I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
It also makes the mistake of throwing storm giants, which have lightning immunity, against a blue dragon with also lightning immunity.
Yeah. Completely
Yep.
Yeah, that's a shitty situation.
Yep. So I wasn't terribly satisfied with that fight. It's probably my least favorite bit of the Storm King's Thunder that I ran. Is the whole climactic battle. I did like the blue dragon fight in the middle, where you guys were fighting the two blue dragons that were flying around.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I reference that quite a bit whenever I'm talking about stuff, and that was a really memorable sequence. It was like a little heist thing. We had to like go in and steal the treasure, and then run back while the dragons are coming at us, and we had all this like splitting the party and tactical shit going on. Yeah, it was really neat.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't want to detract, but that also brings up another point about dragons that I love, is that dragon implies treasure, which is a great motivation.
That's true.
That is always
any adventuring party.
Yeah. I don't know if has that ever been a quest for any of us that's just been like, hey, there's a dragon over here and we need, you know what, that was a quest in Tomb, and you guys never did it, which was there was a treasure map to like a dragon lair or something.
Oh, yeah. You guys went through all that effort to forge the map and then never followed up on it.
From the very beginning, that was one of the quests from the town was to get a map to a dragon lair, and we just never ended up going in that direction. I think it was on the map forever and just never ended up doing it. Which there was a lot of content in that campaign that we just didn't do. Basically anything that was on like the east side of the jungle.
I think George did that in post credits.
Oh, we mentioned something like in the epilogue. Yeah, he goes over there
right after he was done exterminating the grung.
Yeah, and it's a total like non-event. It's just for spoilers. There's no dragon. There's just I think it's like a trap set by whatever's living there now, and it's like with a one room thing, and you can just get some of the treasure that's left over, but it's not anything. It's very disappointing. So probably good you guys didn't do it. Now, had you done it, I might have probably expanded it like I did other stuff, but
right.
Yeah, the one in the dragon you guys did fight in Tomb, that came down to just we're in like a cave, and I think you guys got the jump on the dragon also.
We did. We were like sneaking around both sides of that like rock column or whatever.
Yeah, and you were able, and surprise round is so freaking huge, and you guys were able to just do a ton of damage right off the bat, and then I forget if that was a straight up. I don't think that was an adult. I don't remember. That was probably young.
Yeah, I think it's a young red one.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about Dragon Combat is I like using some of the older ones and using them their intelligence to get in the heads of the players. Like there is because you have a player in here, I have to be careful what I divulge. But,
I mean, we're all been players at some point, so but yeah.
Well, I mean, it has some lore that impacts your current.
I gotcha.
That there are certain, dragon cultists are involved. They're allies with some dragons, and other dragons hate them. It all depends on it's dragon politics, and there's like my players in Tyranny of Dragons. They're going up against one of the big bad apex dragons that's working for the cult. Well, they didn't realize that they've been spied on. So when they go to fight him, he knows all this stuff about them.
Nice.
And he's trash talking personal stuff like, "Oh, I'm going to go eat your family when I'm done with this," or and it's just upping the ante, getting some players angry, other ones are terrified of the secrets that he's revealing in the fight. And I also had him start the fight off being invisible because he's a caster.
Okay.
Dragons can use magic.
I was a follow up on that. Yes. So obviously the way you make these creatures even more interesting, especially in a non-combat aspect, is to give them spells. Which are there any like strict rules about what's like, are there any like straight up like, hey, here's a variant of their spell, or is it just say like, hey, whatever spells you want to give them, just let them have it because they're fucking dragons?
Right.
Some as written, like in certain modules, have a spell list already.
Okay.
There is one little blurb about a magic variant dragon in the monster manual. It's like one paragraph. It's not very helpful.
Yeah.
The way I do it is I just give them a level. Like, hey, this is a level 9 sorcerer.
Okay.
And then I go. I go shopping. Then I go shopping.
Yeah, I think that's a fun where you can, and you can play up their layer and their elemental stuff and be like, all right, here are the kind of spells you would be working with.
OG Old Gnawbones, she has a spell list, and she has made her own spells. She has unique spells that she has crafted.
That's always fun.
They're like her signature item. You see those, and your players are going, "What the crap is that? That's not in my book." And you laugh, and you go, "I know."
Well, that's what I'm looking forward to. I dug through some older editions for Imrith.
Goldmine.
She had a force burn ability that gets rid of players' spell slots. And expends them.
Oh, that's nasty.
My cleric is going to hate me.
Yeah.
That is some of the best advice by Gleg right there, is go back into some of the lore. And that was one of the things I fed Eric for Rhyme, is go back into 3.5, the Dragonomicon, and some of the other books, where they do give you dragon spell lists. They give you special abilities for certain named dragons. Fizbins would also work. There's a lot of stuff that'll get you beyond the monster manual.
I have my one complaint for Fizbins, having not fully read it yet, is that they name drop Imrith just out of the blue.
Really?
That's
Uh-oh.
one of my players got that for Christmas, and I told him he was not allowed to read it until I literally have a sticky note. It's one paragraph, but it's not just like the general like, oh, Imrith's a blue dragon in the desert, and it literally says that
Like she's
takes
the
the
boss
guise of a storm giant.
Oh
And
man. Well, so that is something that I found really weird in Storm King's Thunder. Is that Amrith doesn't change her name for her giant form. Like she goes to work in the giant, the storm giant city as Iamrith. So it's like, okay,
Nobody's Google searching her and
nobody's
figuring
Google
out.
yeah,
which is so what that made me do in the campaign was just hide her name, like use nicknames when you guys would find like books or scrolls or people would talk about the ancient blue
Oh,
dragon.
yeah.
They could never use her name because you guys were eventually going to meet a giant named Iamrith, and that was not when you were supposed to figure out the villain.
yeah. I gave her. I don't remember what it is because my players aren't there yet. But I gave her like a pseudonym where you shuffle around the letters and it's like mystery or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the first things I changed because that makes no sense.
Right.
Tell me about Fizzbands. I have not looked at that yet or read it or anything.
I've only looked at a few of the stat blocks. My favorite thing out of there is they have a living breath weapon that changes based on which dragon creates it.
Oh, like the living spells in Rhyme?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Interesting. Are there different dragon any other interesting things about like dragon differences? Or I mean, I've seen some from like Tomb of Beasts had some interesting. There was like a void dragon, and there's in every single. It's funny. It's every single monster book I've ever looked at. They have to have the dragons. That's just a staple. Like, you just have to have some version of your dragon, and sometimes they're cool and interesting, and other times they're very clearly just copy pasted from the monster manual with just a few things tweaked around here and there. But like, it's such a ubiquitous part of any monster supplement. So I guess it'd be refreshing that I would not have that complaint with a book that was entirely about dragons, because that would be the entire point, was to just explore more dragons, give us more dragon variants.
There is a if I remember correctly, they reintroduced the gem dragons. So you have the metallics, the chromatics, and then they bring back the gem dragons. So like amethyst and sapphire and those kind, which is a throwback from antiquity. And they bring in some new feats where you can have like the blessing of the chromatic or the metallic or the gem dragons.
Because Raymond fucking took one of those for the Forge of Fury.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that happened, but it has an error on Roll20's part.
And
yeah,
so
I'll take this dragon blessing.
Yeah, and well, it is technically a feat, but they call it the blessing of the gem dragon or whatever. So your mileage may vary, but there's some of those things that a lot of people find a lot of there's some fun stuff with them. And then you have Dragonkin. Tyranny of Dragons gives you drakes, which are flightless dragons that are kind of like almost a reskinned dire wolf.
Really?
There's ambush drakes, which tend to be sneaky guys that'll it's like the rogue dire wolf. You have guard drakes, which
aren't all creatures just reskinned dire wolves at some point?
To some extent, you're not
so
wrong.
Many.
You're not wrong. And so some of those were fun. You've got a dragon cultist that's got two guard drakes on a leash. All of a sudden, that's not an easy fight, because these things are rolling around with like 65 hit points, and if they bite you, you're going to know it. So they don't have breath weapons or anything like that, but they have
like a minion,
claw.
Fill out a layer.
Yeah, it's almost like a step below the wormling.
Okay.
And then you got your half dragons that they like to use, where there's a gladiator and a veteran stat block that you run into a red half dragon. That's a challenge. And then something that you've talked about before, Eric, is mixing things up. So one of the big fights I did just a couple weeks ago was I had a fight start, and it was a grudge match. The party had hated this evil backstabber betrayer, and they're finally getting vengeance. Round one, the fight's on. They've already matched up. They're moving into strategy. Then I had a young red dragon with a half dragon gladiator on it drop in behind them.
Nice.
And they went, and you kind of fight dragons by color. So they're currently going up against the white dragon wing of the dragon cult. So everybody's loaded with cold resistance and all this. And I dropped a red dragon behind them. Not prepared. So, you can do things like that because the White Dragon Wing was getting their butts kicked, and the leader of the dragon cult is over the Red Dragon, so they called for reinforcements.
Nice.
And he sent help. So, you can, once again, your enemies know what they're doing. The bad guys know what they're doing.
Has anybody had
especially dragons.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, has anybody actually done what Eric was talking about earlier, and just have a dragon be a complete asshole and just strafe breath weapon? I've never had the guts to even try that in real combat. I mean, like we've done it in like in rhyme. Eric was doing that to us in rhyme, but it wasn't combat.
Yeah,
I did once in that Dragonlance module. Spoilers for that. It's like that scene from Lord of the Rings where they knock the pebble down the well, and every orc in Mordor comes out to get them. So it was one of those scenes where there's a big well in the middle of Zaxaroth, and someone went to look down it, and Chrysaneth comes out. She almost TPK'd the party. It was one of the big moments of that section that everyone still talks about. Is the cleric was the only one that lived, and went like Marine Corps corpsman, grabbing the dead characters and the wounded ones and running into the temple, the only standing structure, and exposing herself to breath weapons and everything else, making her saves, and got everybody to safety.
Wow.
And then
I can see
went through and rezzing everybody and stuff. And it was a very powerful moment. And so that part was a lot of, as the DM, it worked out perfectly. As the players, they're going like, what just happened? And it's like, that's what you want to do. They're going to remember it for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I think that kind of situation, doing that kind of thing works if the goal is not to kill the dragon. If the goal is like in your scenario, the goal is just to survive, like to get everyone into safety.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is the goal of the scenario. Then a dragon, flying around, just constantly breath weaponing people. That works. Or like in War for the Lost Plain, like the goal is just getting a sword out of its head. And ending the fight that way versus, like, oh no, you actually have to fight this thing that's never going to land and just constantly, fly around.
When a dragon gets a surprise round with a breath weapon, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That's a tricky thing to pull off in combat, I think, is to create that situation where like, hey, this is a fight right now, but it's not a fight you're probably going to survive. That's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of players are like, they're going to fight till the death, and they're not really looking at like egress at any particular moment. I don't know if we've had a situation where that's come up, but I couldn't think of it off the top of my head, where we were in a straight fight and then we thought, oh, we actually can't do this. I feel like at some point the DM would start, doing things to pull back versus forcing the players to pull back.
Right.
But that might be a different conversation. Has anybody had a situation where the dragon was not the big bad? Of like, it was a surprise where like, oh no, the dragon's actually just working for an even bigger bad or something else? Or is the dragon always on top?
Not yet, but I'm doing that in my Storm King's Thunder campaign.
Really?
Yeah, Slarkrithel is going to be the big bad evil guy.
Oh, you're flipping it up.
I like
it. Yeah.
Okay.
I like it a lot.
I actually like that too, because like Slarkrithel was a big part of my Storm King's Thunder, and I really liked him as a villain.
Yeah. That was a memorable moment. We were on the ship and the fucking like tentacles like bursting out
Yep.
everywhere.
Exactly.
What-
Yeah.
I was so confused when I watched that because I was like, "Oh, I kind of like the original ship map. I wonder why he's not using that." And then when you shared it during the finale, I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
right.
I have to use that map."
Phased map of like the tentacles are coming out, now the tentacles are on the deck, and now the tentacles are hugging the ship. Yeah.
Map is so good.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
That's cool. That'd be great. I think that's a cool tweak because that would be a pretty great subversion because obviously people usually think, okay, well the dragon is our big thing, and then and you know you can use it where it's like, you know, a not fully grown dragon would be one easy way to do it and just have it be, you know, happens to be working for somebody else who's even more powerful, but it'd be pretty rare because pretty much across the board on dragons, they're pretty arrogant, they're pretty top of the pack. Like, you know, it would be something they would have to be very clever about. Like, okay, I'm gonna bide my time, I want to work for this asshole, and then I'm becoming my own dragon.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
Or just an alliance that happens to play out with the players where you defeat the dragon first, and then you've got the other part of the alliance.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a situation where you would have like a boss fight where the dragon was like a minion or a lieutenant of something bigger.
Oh, that's
The closest.
Well,
go ahead, Chris.
I was just gonna say we had not quite that, but something that was kind of like that at the end of Princes of the Apocalypse. There was a red dragon.
You're
there.
right. There was.
And he was kind of hanging out watching,
like right
watching
before
it go
the
down.
final area.
Yeah.
And it's like a social encounter.
We weren't really actively fighting him, but he was definitely not on our side for that. He was like there and sort of aggressively watching us fight the fire
I think at the boy, we're going through a lot of campaigns right now with the dragons.
Yes, we are.
We usually have about one or two spoilers for the end of our Prince of the Apocalypse campaign, where I believe Heather's character made like a temporary alliance with the red dragon, who I think is an adult red dragon, straight up at the end of that dungeon. And I think it mentions the fact that that's from the book, that the players kind of work with this dragon a little bit. And at the very end, I think that dragon like helps either save her or helps bring her to the portal or something.
Yes.
To where I don't think it's ever actually a combatant, and it doesn't help in that fight or anything, but it does like help like in a narrative cinematic way, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was ever actually in the fight. So that's
think
kind of a
it
good
was.
example, but also was not.
I do remember you kept teasing it though. You kept being like, "That red dragon's watching. He can step in at any time."
I was going to say the closest I've ever come to doing that was the dragon they were fighting wasn't the final boss. It was the dragon they didn't see that was the final boss. Draco Liches have the ability that, like any other liches, they frequently put their phylactery in a magic item, like a sword. And so they were fighting a dragon. They kill the dragon. Everyone's beat the heck up. They're happy. They're looting it. Someone pulls a magic sword out, and it triggers the phylactery, and the Draco Lich goes into the body of the dead dragon they just fought. Round 2 has begun.
That's pretty good.
And they're now fighting a Draco Lich when they're already, as Eric likes to say, spent resources, kids? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of those, what is Mythic Odyssey of Theros, I think, did that, where they added the Mythic Monsters, which basically literally works like, hey, you defeat the boss, and then once you reduce its regular hit points down to 0, then you trigger the bullshit second stage boss fight. It heals up to, I think, about half its hit points, and then gains like new abilities, and then it's on again, which is not as cool as what you're describing, which is transforms into a straight up Draco Lich. But I like the idea of that's how you just make a more powerful boss fight, is you kind of have to borrow from like that video game bullshit of like, oh, I hate the second stage boss fight. But I think in D&D it can work pretty well, because the whole point of that is to stretch the player's resources along, and that can be pretty nice if they've been like, all right, we've saved our stuff for the boss, now we're gonna unleash everything, and then you go into this further and like, oh shit, we got like nothing left in the tank.
Then what makes it good is when they killed the Draco Lich, he goes back into the sword. And so the next time they fight a dragon and kill it, it comes back.
Oh, they don't know?
Do this. They didn't know.
Oh shit!
More players.
It
That
happened.
is nasty.
It was the third time when they kill a dragon. Everyone just circled that body, going, "Come on, come on!"
Yeah, we're ready.
They
We're
just thought
ready.
it's
Let's
like an
go.
effect that's
We're-
going on.
It's like we're ready for you.
Oh man.
And they just that's when they finally figured out what was going on, because the only thing they had really carried with them was that one magic blade. And they go, "Yeah, we're breaking this sucker. We're done."
More
Wow.
bad than good.
That's pretty
The
cool.
Mythic Encounters you mentioned, Fizzbands does that where they have an aspect of Bahamut and an aspect of Tiamat that both have like the mythic level, if you want to take it that high.
Okay.
Where you manage to reduce their hit points the first time, and I want to say it even resets like their legendary resistances,
Oh
which
wow.
is just evil.
That really is.
Yeah. But I mean, if the players are high enough, like D&D gets pretty
Yeah.
crazy with how strong players are. So
That's the thing is, for Lost Mine of Fandelver, I was terrified I was going to TPK my party when they
yeah.
came across Venom Fang, because they were only level 4, and I want to say the adult green dragon's like a CR8,
Mm-hmm.
and he managed to get a surprise round and hit
Ooh.
2 of 3 of my players with that breath weapon. But one of them was a Warforged, so he had advantage on the save and resistance to the damage. And then the other one was my brother's a min-maxer and has a Tortle Abjuration Wizard. He had like infinite temporary HP. So yeah, they managed to send Venom Fang packing instead of
Wow.
TPKing the party like I thought was going to happen.
That's
I don't think we fought Venom Fang, did we?
I don't
Like, it was
think
very much
so. I think it was a
it was like
social
the it was
encounter.
like the white dragon thing, where it's like we're just
Yeah.
like we no, this is beyond us.
He might have done something where it like batted somebody. I don't recall, but I think it was mostly just a social encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall that. All right, we've been going for almost an hour, so do we want to do closing thoughts on dragons? It's been a very popular topic. We're gonna go in reverse order and go with Chris first.
I think the excitement with which we've been talking about dragons is just accentuating my earlier point that they're fun creatures. They're fun creatures to use. They're fun creatures to role play. For me, role playing them especially is a lot of fun. And I forget which one of you made the point, but using them sparingly is probably the best bet, because you do want them to be special. You know what I mean?
Unless you're Stan playing Tyranny of Dragons, where the entire campaign is like,
I guess that's true,
dragon cultists, and you're dealing with dragons all the time, then it's
yeah. And then dragons become part of the landscape.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, if you can just make dragon encounters memorable, I think they become very memorable.
Yeah. Pegleg, closing thoughts on using dragons.
Dragons are iconic for a reason. They're one of the best stat blocks that D&D has to offer, especially when you're able to do what you've been doing and use them as like almost a force of nature going in first, where it's not fighting them. It's just, hopefully we can survive through this and then maybe get them later.
Yeah. Stan, closing thoughts on dragons.
Dragons dragons are intelligent. They know what they're doing most of the time, and so play them accordingly. They have agents outside their lair, so they have access to information that even the players might not have, and use it against them. And then even good dragons, all dragons are always dangerous. Always dangerous.
That's good advice. Even the good dragons might not be on your side. Yeah, I agree that I think dragons are probably one of the best stat blocks in terms of balanced and the features that they have in the monster manual. They're certainly the most varied in terms of you've got a dragon for every kind of like biome and tier of play and situation, so there's really no excuse not to use them. On the other hand, they're often, their intelligence and their apex category and their haughty nature often can make them challenging, because you can't necessarily throw them into a dungeon the way you can a lot of other monsters. They're usually the boss of a realm, or in charge of a situation or something. But I think that can also make things very fun and interesting. And I love teasing dragons first, especially if you can do the 1-2 punch of first having it be an environmental challenge essentially, or a social challenge. where the players are, dealing with the dragon ahead of time, whether it's burning down their ship or just flying over a town or something. Dragons are active and they're doing shit, and then later on you can have them, meet that dragon in the dungeon. And it's just, for any monster, really, it's so good when you can have these sociable monsters that the players can interact with first, even if they're not your big bad villain. But you can still create that dynamic to where by the time they finally meet this creature, like, oh man, I really can't wait to fucking take this thing on. That is very, very satisfying. All right, I think that will do it for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you to Stan, Pegleg, and special guest Chris for joining me this month. And to all the patrons, shouts to Platinum patrons, Joe Will, Tiny Dancer, Thomas, Adam, Stan, William, I'm Loud, Kyle, Brandon, Genocider, David, Nebula99, Eclectic, Role Player Roll, James, and Lindsay. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, and James. Thank you all very much for your support. Hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion.
Bye.
Thank you.
Well.